In today's video, I'm going to be determining whether or not this Smart is ready for its MOT. I'm Stephen from Auto Night. A very warm welcome to another video. Now, if you've ever been to a main dealer for any work on your car, then you may be very familiar with this. This is a vehicle condition report, often abbreviated to a VCR or VHC, vehicle health check, and these are usually completed when you bring your car in for any other work at the dealership, and this is generally done free of charge. It just gives you an idea of what else might be wrong with your car. Now, some people will see this as nothing but a cash cow, just to extract more money out of the customer, but I think of it as more of a duty of care, because if you're in for, say, a recall or something and there's a glaring fault with the car that we'd notice, I think it's only fair we tell you. What you decide to do with that information is up to you. So whilst this is no substitute for an actual MOT, it will give a fair idea of the condition of this Smart, and this will help me decide whether or not it's MOT ready. Starting inside the car, seat belts work, no warning lights on the dashboard, brake pedal is firm. We can't check brake efficiency here, that'll need to be done on the rollers when it has its MOT. Windscreen washers work, as do the wipers. Oh dear, something has crapped on it. In terms of lighting, we've got an offside brake light out. All other lights are good. No misting, condensation, or damage to the lenses. We checked the fuel cap seal for any perishing, and that looks okay. This is a very common cause for a fuel smell on these. This little O-ring can crack, but you can get that O-ring separately if you really hunt around. Good tiny little chip in the windscreen right there, and a little bit of delamination. That's not within the field of vision. Visual check of the wiper blades reveals there are no splits or perishing. Number plates are all good, there's no delamination or damage. They can be clearly read. Rear wiper wouldn't form part of an MOT check, but just worth checking it. A check under the bonnet shows that the brake fluid level is fine, screen wash reservoir is full, and the coolant tank is at the correct level. The camera won't pick this up, but this belt looks okay. Engine oil is between minimum and maximum. The more observant of you will have noticed that the service indicator is showing that the service is due on this car, so the oil will be changed, as well as all the other components for a full service. I'll probably stick these back up at some point with some tape, because I never like it when these are hanging down. Visually, no oil leaks from above. Because this is a visual health check, most dealerships wouldn't remove the wheels to perform this, unless the car was in for a service. But I need to inspect this at a deeper level, so I am going to remove the wheels. A really good thing about these cars is because they've got such a short wheelbase, whether you jack them up at the back or the front, you tend to bring both sides up at the same time, which is very handy. Just going to crack off these bolts ever so slightly. The car is secured on an axle stand here at the front. Check for play, side to side. No binding. The coil spring is intact. There's no play in the top bearing, and the shock absorber is dry. The drop link is fine with no movement. Lower ball joint is fine, and the track rod end. Steering rack gaiters on these are the hard plastic type. They don't normally give any trouble. Brake hose is free from any perishing. The discs have just got some surface corrosion where this car's been laid up, but there's no significant lip. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if these are relatively new pads and discs. I don't like the fact that the black paint has got onto here from where the wheels were rather shoddily painted, but that should be easy to wire brush off. It's got onto the wheel bolts too, and yeah, this is me being a bit pernickety, I know, but I can deal with that. Seeing this again has reminded me that I've managed to get hold of some of these little retaining clips that go into these panels. This is what they look like, and that's the part number if you're curious. Dowels, that's the official description. Easily resolved. Let's get the paint off these, we pop them in there like that. This tyre is a load of crap. It's a Road March, whatever that is. It looks like a Chinese ditch finder to me. It's got plenty of tread on it. And there's no damage on the inner or outer sidewall. 6mm on the centre of tread. Now I have got two new Kumos to go on the front, but the tyres that this car came with on the front were shockingly worn on the inner edges, so I don't want to introduce those to the car until I've had the wheel alignment checked. These wheels are just ones that I had in the loft. I repainted these centre caps because they were really scruffy. These are held on just with the presence of the wheel bolts. They're not actually fixed in any other way to the wheel. I'm now turning my attention to the rear of the car, and the axle stand has been moved to the rear to support it. No binding. No play. From this side I can see that everything is in order with the spring. No leakage from the shock. Inner and outer drive shaft gaiters are okay. There is a slight oil leak from that near side drive shaft oil seal on the diff there. And it looks like that exhaust has been repaired before. I think somebody has welded on a new bracket. It's quite common for these to rust off, but that looks secure. Metal brake pipes look okay from here. Obviously they'll see more under the car when it's being inspected. A visual health check wouldn't normally involve removal of the brake drum, but I'm going to remove this brake drum because I just know that these wheel cylinders are really prone to leaking, and if they are leaking I'll be changing them. Again, unless it actually affects the brake efficiency, or they were leaking enough to actually be physically showing at the back here, this isn't something that would be picked up on an MOT either. Let's get my special screwdriver. That one's dry. As is that one. This may be a first for me on these cars. These are nearly always leaking. But that's a good thing. Obviously I'd rather it wasn't. The adjuster's out a fair way, but I don't think it's anywhere near at the end of its travels. And those shoes will be fine for now. So I'm just going to give that a clean out with some brake cleaner and I can put this back together. Normally I rough the inside of the disc up with some emery cloth, and the same with the shoes. In terms of this wheel and tyre, this was on the front of this car when I got it, but you can see, looking at this, that it has got some wear on the inner edge. I'm not going to record any details of this tyre on the vehicle condition report because this isn't going to be on here for very long. I'm just waiting for my newly repainted rear wheels to come back from having their new tyres fitted, and then they'll be swapped over with these. So I'm not going to bother fitting the little centre cap. I did the same with these wheel bolts off camera and got rid of all the black paint. I'm now going to repeat the same process on this side, and let's see what we find here. No play on this side, let's get the wheel off. Little bit of corrosion to this lowest turn on this spring, but it's not broken. Might be a precursor of what's to come though. Shock's dry. Surface corrosion on this disc, but as you can see I can rub it off with my finger, so that's not a problem. Like I said when I looked at the other side, I think it might have had new pads and discs fairly recently. More black residue from the wheel painting, I'll sort that in a minute. No perishing to the brake hoses. All good with the drop link. Trap rod end, no splits in the boot, no play. And the lower ball joint boot is fine. The steering rack gate is okay in there as well. So no dramas on this side. All traces of the black paint have been removed from this caliper. And the wheel bolts are no longer black as well. This offside front tyre is a Nankang, so another fairly crappy tyre. We've got a little bit of cracking, just the beginnings of some cracking here, but this tyre is only going to be temporary. 6mm in the centre. Doesn't look so good on the inner edge. More like 3 on the inner edge. But I don't need to get too hung up on the state of this tyre because it's only temporary, and I've got the 2 new ones, as I said earlier, in the garage, waiting to be fitted once I've had the wheel alignment checked and I've refurbished these front wheels. Ultimately I'm going to be putting some Passion alloys on here. I've been speaking to Jordan Kuhn, details in the description, who is excellent for smart components as he breaks these vehicles. Just don't buy the set that I want from him. And now to this offside rear. No binding or roughness. This wheel and tyre will be scrap, you'll see why in a minute. Let's get the wheel off. And look at that tyre, completely bald on the inner edge. But I'll be marking this down as new on this side because the new one will be going on here within the next couple of days. You can clearly see now why I want to get the wheel alignment checked on this car. And at this point things really get worse, because this is meant to be the mounting bracket that would be welded to the exhaust, and it's no longer connected to anything, meaning that this exhaust is free to swing. Now I'm thinking that the noise that you hear inside might not actually be from the gearbox now, it could be this vibrating. So what do we do here? Well, I try and get hold of some tubing like this and then get my friend to see if there's enough good metal left on the exhaust itself to weld it to it and then reinstate this. That's one option. Or again, I just speak with Jordan Kuhn and get a second-hand one. As I said earlier, he is brilliant. He's a good trusted source for components. Definitely give him a shout if you need anything. That's disappointing and a definite impediment to an MOT. But it's not all doom and gloom, because everything's okay with this drive shaft. Shock absorber isn't leaking. The spring's intact. And everything else seems okay here. There's a lot of impacted mud here. I saw that on the other side. I'll clean this all properly when I do the clutch. Let's get this drum off. Dry. And dry. What a result. And just like the other side, everything's cleaned up, and I've given this a good rub down with some emery cloth or sandpaper. Again, this temporary rear wheel being refitted. As I said, these are actually off the front of this very car. Hence they are very skinny wheels. Okay, so that's the end of the inspection. Let's go to the house and talk about the findings. So what have we got then in terms of the findings? So we've got surface corrosion to the front brake discs due to lack of use. That's going to wear off once I start driving it again. Clutch replacement required. I mean, yeah, we know it needs a clutch. I don't think it's going to stop it from getting an MOT because it's not currently playing up, but ultimately it needs doing. Mandatory lights external. We've got an offside brake light bulb out. In terms of the under-bonnet, I've just got service due because the indicator is showing that. I'll be doing the service. Again, don't need to do that before the MOT. Linings, brake pads and shoes, everything's fine there. The wheel cylinders weren't leaking. Discs and drums, no problems there. Hoses, pipes, cables, wheel bearings, all good. I've put down advised brake fluid change. I don't know when it was last done. I will be doing that anyway. And now for the big one, the exhaust system here. Offside rear silencer bracket. I mean, that's rotted off. That's had it. Whether or not I can get a section of that pipe and then get it welded on to reinstate that, or whether I need a new one, remains to be seen. I need to speak to my friend because I can't weld and he can. Slight corrosion to offside front coil spring there. That is just slight, but I mean, it might be a precursor to breakage. And I've got a slight oil leak here, near side drive shaft oil seal. I'll be doing both of those oil seals when I do the clutch. Tyres, I mean, those front ones are kind of temporary anyway because I've got the new ones to fit once the wheel alignment is done. But I've got cracking between the treads there, so that's a bit borderline, but the rears are going to be new once they come back from my friend's workshop. They're probably being fitted as we speak. So that's the vehicle health check. I mean, it's no substitute for an actual MOT, but it's just good indication of the state of the car. MOT legislation changes quite frequently. I've been out of the trade for quite a few years now. I'm not an MOT tester right now, so I need to actually get the official opinion of an MOT tester, which will happen once I've sorted out these few bits that would be an impediment to getting that MOT. So before I end this video, you might remember a while ago I mentioned that this on the vehicle, which enables you to charge the battery without removing the carpet and the wedge, wasn't particularly well wired, well made with the sort of connectors that I like to use. So I'm just going to show you now just how I made this as nice as it is. Back to my little wiring loom here that goes between the battery and the cabin of the car, which means you don't have to lift the carpets if you want to charge the battery. I've now received from Amazon these 5 inline fuses. I think it was only about a £5 for all of these, maybe £7. Pretty good deal. So let's get one of these little beauties out of here and go about adding it to this circuit. I'm going to cut this down a little bit and strip off a small amount of the insulation. Here's the fuse holder. It comes with a loop of wiring, so we cut that at the halfway point. And I'm going to cut a little bit more off here and strip this off. Got a little connector here. It's a crimp type. And we now add this in and crimp. And then shrink the insulation of the connector by applying some heat. Very neat. We strip a little bit off at the other end. Put some red heat shrink over that. Taking one of these little terminals, we crimp it into position, then crimp the insulation side, and you get something as neat as that. And slide the heat shrink over. So we've got the red for the positive terminal and the black for the negative. Just pop in a 5 amp fuse in there and close the cap. Now I think we've got a much more professional setup here. We've got decent connectors, all protected with a fuse. And now you've seen how I made it, let's get it fitted. remains of the wedge. So all we need to do is to wire this to the positive terminal and this to the negative. So I'll start by disconnecting this with a 10mm. When playing around with the positive terminal, it's a very good idea to completely disconnect this negative terminal. Because if you don't, and you work on that, and you touch that, and you touch the positive and then ground, you'll have sparks of fireworks and all sorts of things going on, which can be quite startling, or worse. I'm going to remove this nut completely because we are ultimately going to be fitting this over it. And with the connector fitted, we can then refit the nut. We'll get that out of the way now for the time being, and we need to make sure that stays disconnected. And we can now undo the positive terminal. And just like the negative, we want to completely remove that 10mm nut, taking care not to lose the bolt with the square head on it that's at the back there. So with this ring terminal on the positive terminal of the battery there, that can be retightened. And then we can refit and tighten the negative terminal. With both terminals reconnected and tightened, I'm going to fit a couple of cable ties just to secure this. I can now fit this battery positive terminal cover. The two pegs just go into a couple of holes there, recesses in the battery, and just like that, that terminal is protected from mishaps and unintentional contact. So I hope you'll agree that that's a much neater setup than what was here when I got the car. I'm certainly happier with it. Refit my somewhat depleted wedge. And here we go, an easy way to charge the battery without having to remove all of this, safely protected by a fuse. It can be hid neatly under this carpet mat when it's not in use. And as I shut this door, I'm reminded that there's meant to be a little cover here, but it's missing. Before I fit it, I just want to check to see if this emergency access point actually works on this car. So I'm going to lock the car. And this is designed to let you in if you have no power to the car. You can't lock it, you can only unlock it. It's cable operated and it works. This is the part number for the little cap that covers it up. It's a tiny little thing and it just pushes in like that. I don't know if that's the right way around, but it doesn't really matter, does it? But that's it for this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you again in another one very soon.